In the glittering skyline of Chicago, where steel towers pierce the clouds and fortunes are made with a single signature, there lived a man who had everything money could buy, except peace. Joshua Reynolds, tech mogul and self-made billionaire, controlled an empire from his fortress in the sky. But the higher he climbed, the more isolated he became. He trusted no one, allowed no one close. His penthouse on the 89th floor was his sanctuary, his prison, his kingdom of until the day a quiet woman with calloused hands and secrets in her eyes walked through his door. This is the story of how a man who had conquered the world learned his most valuable lesson from the person he'd never even noticed. A tale of pride, redemption, and the unexpected places where we find our humanity. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The November wind howled against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Reynolds Tower, but Joshua Reynolds didn't notice. He stood in his private office on the 89th floor, eyes fixed on 6 glowing monitors displaying real-time data from his cryptocurrency empire. Each screen told a story of millions flowing in and out, digital fortunes being made and lost in milliseconds. At 42, Joshua had everything the world told him to want. His penthouse consumed the entire top floor of Chicago's newest architectural marvel, 20,000 square feet of marble, glass, and obsidian. Original Rothkos adorned walls that cost more per square foot than most people's homes. His walk-in wine cellar held bottles worth more than luxury cars. The automated systems controlling his environment were so sophisticated, they adjusted room temperature based on his body heat before he even felt uncomfortable. Yet every morning, he woke up with the same hollow feeling in his chest, as if someone had carved out a piece of him while he slept. "Mr. Reynolds, the Tokyo call is ready," his assistant Marcus Chen's voice crackled through the intercom. Marcus worked from the 88th floor, one of the few employees allowed even that close. The 89th floor, Joshua's penthouse, was strictly off-limits to all staff. No exceptions. "Root it through," Joshua replied, his voice carrying the crisp efficiency of someone who'd forgotten how to speak without giving orders. The call was brief, brutal, and profitable. A competitor's cryptocurrency venture had collapsed overnight. Joshua's algorithms had predicted it weeks ago, and he'd positioned accordingly. Another 15 million in profit before breakfast. He should have felt something: satisfaction, pride, vindication. Instead, he felt nothing at all. The penthouse around him gleamed with sterile perfection. Not a cushion out of place, not a speck of dust on the Italian marble floors. The cleaning staff came twice weekly, but only when Joshua left the building, usually between 6 and 8 a.m. when he visited his private gym in the basement. They had exactly 90 minutes to clean 20,000 square feet, timed to the second by building security. They entered through the service elevator, cleaned in systematic teams of 8, and left without a trace of their presence except the lemony scent of polish and the absolute absence of any human warmth. Joshua preferred it that way. People were variables he couldn't control, emotions he couldn't quantify, chaos he couldn't code. His penthouse was his laboratory of solitude, where everything existed in perfect, predictable order. His phone buzzed, a rare occurrence. Most communication came through encrypted channels. He glanced at the screen. Eleanor Reynolds, his mother. He declined the call. It was the third one this week. She'd be calling about Thanksgiving again, trying to orchestrate one of her family gatherings that always devolved into thinly veiled criticisms of his lifestyle, his lack of a wife, his obsession with money over meaning, as if meaning paid the bills or built empires. Joshua walked through his gallery hallway, past paintings he'd bought because his art advisor said they were good investments. He couldn't name the artists or explain what the splashes of color meant. They were assets, appreciating on his walls like stocks in a portfolio. The kitchen was a marvel of German engineering, all brushed steel and precision, with appliances that cost more than most people earned in a year. He used it to make coffee. Everything else arrived through the service elevator. Meals prepared by Michelin-starred chefs, delivered in insulated containers, consumed alone at a dining table that seated 12. This morning, however, something was different. On the kitchen counter sat a small vase he'd never seen before. Inside, a single sunflower, cheerful, yellow, absurdly out of place in his monochrome world. Joshua stared at it, his mind immediately calculating intrusion scenarios. Security breach. Cleaning staff violation. Someone had been here when they shouldn't have been. Had left something they shouldn't have left. He picked up his phone, ready to call security, to fire the entire cleaning company, to ensure whoever had violated his space never worked in Chicago again. But something stopped him. The flower seemed to glow in the morning light, its bright petals a shocking burst of life in his carefully curated mausoleum. He found himself reaching out, touching one petal. It was real, soft, imperfect. A tiny bit of pollen dusted his finger. When was the last time he'd touched something alive that wasn't programmed or purchased? He pulled his hand back as if burned, then grabbed his phone again. But before he could dial, his eye caught something else, a small note card beneath the vase, written in neat, careful handwriting. Even towers need sunshine. Who was E? Joshua's mind raced through possibilities. Eleanor? No. His mother would have signed her full name, would have used this as ammunition for one of her lectures. Emily from accounting? She wouldn't dare access his penthouse. Eduardo from security. The man barely spoke English, let alone left poetic notes. For the first time in years, Joshua encountered a variable he couldn't immediately solve. Someone had been in his space, had seen his life, had left something behind that wasn't an invoice or a profit statement. He should have been angry. He should have been on the phone with lawyers and security chiefs. Instead, he found himself staring at that absurd sunflower, feeling something he hadn't experienced in longer than he could remember. Curiosity. The flower sat there all day while he worked, its presence needling at the edge of his consciousness. During a conference call with Singapore, he found his eyes drifting to it. While reviewing acquisition documents, he caught himself wondering who had placed it there, what they'd seen in his pristine, empty penthouse, what had possessed them to leave behind something so unnecessary, so impractical, so kind by evening. As Chicago's lights began to twinkle below his windows like earthbound stars, Joshua Reynolds sat in his leather chair, a throne worth $40,000, and stared at a $5 sunflower that had somehow breached his fortress walls. Tomorrow was Friday. The cleaning staff would come again while he was at the gym. He could have security waiting, could identify the culprit, could ensure it never happened again. But as he sat there in his perfect empty kingdom, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that money couldn't, Joshua made a decision that surprised even himself. He would wait. He would watch. He would solve this mystery, and perhaps, though he wouldn't admit it even to himself, he wanted to see if that spot of sunshine would appear again in his carefully controlled darkness. The sunflower remained on his counter, the first living thing to spend the night in his penthouse since he'd moved in 3 years ago. Its cheerful face seemed to mock his isolation, to question his choices, to suggest that perhaps his fortress of solitude wasn't the victory he'd convinced himself it was. Joshua Reynolds, the man who had everything, went to bed that night thinking about a flower and a mysterious note, wondering why this small intrusion felt less like a violation and more like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man who'd forgotten he couldn't breathe underwater. The city glittered below, indifferent to his questions, but somewhere in that vast metropolis of 8 million souls, someone knew his secrets, had seen his emptiness, and had dared to leave a small piece of hope in the form of a sunflower. Who was E? And why, for the first time in years, did Joshua Reynolds find himself actually wanting to know the answer? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Friday morning arrived with the kind of grey drizzle that made Chicago look like it was weeping. Joshua Reynolds stood at his window at 5:47 a.m., already dressed in his workout gear, watching water streak down the glass like liquid silver. He should have been thinking about the Shanghai deal closing in 6 hours, or the Federal Reserve announcement that could swing markets by billions. Instead, his mind kept circling back to that sunflower, now slightly wilted on his counter, its petals beginning to droop like a secret losing its power. The gym. The cleaning crew would arrive at 6:15 a.m. sharp, the moment his elevator descended. They had their 90-minute window, and today Joshua intended to break every rule he'd established for his carefully ordered existence. At 5:55 a.m., he called his driver and cancelled. Then he did something he'd never done in 3 years of living in Reynolds Tower. He called building security with specific instructions. "Jim, this is Mr. Reynolds. I need the security footage from the service elevator corridor, 89th floor, from yesterday's cleaning session. Send it to my private server within the hour." There was a pause. "Mr. Reynolds, is there a security concern? Should we—" "Just the footage, Jim, nothing more." Joshua hung up before Jim could ask questions he didn't want to answer. Why was he being secretive about this? Why not just confront the cleaning company directly, demand to know which employee had violated protocol? Because something told him that direct confrontation would end this mystery before it began. And for reasons he couldn't fully articulate, he didn't want it to end. Not yet. He went through his morning routine on autopilot. Protein shake, vitamins, checking overnight market movements on his phone. But instead of heading down to the gym, he moved to his home office and pulled up the security feed Jim had sent. The footage showed the service elevator doors opening at 6:17 a.m. yesterday. 8 people emerged, all wearing the teal uniforms of Premier Cleaning Services. They moved with practiced efficiency, splitting into teams, hauling equipment carts loaded with supplies. Joshua fast-forwarded, watching them clean in accelerated motion like worker ants scurrying through his domain. Their team assigned to the kitchen. 3 people, 2 men efficiently wiping surfaces, checking appliances, and 1 woman. She was different from the others. Where they moved with mechanical precision, she seemed to notice things. She paused at his cookbook collection, pristine books he'd never opened, and gently straightened one that had shifted. She ran her hand along the marble counter with something that looked almost like affection. Joshua zoomed in on her face. Early 30s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. No makeup that he could see. There was something about her features, a quiet strength in the set of her jaw, a gentleness around her eyes that seemed at odds with the efficiency of her movements. She was the one who placed the sunflower. The footage showed her pulling it from her cleaning cart, not from a Premier cleaning supply bag, but from what looked like a personal item. She'd brought it from home. She set it down carefully, almost reverently, then wrote something on a small card she'd tucked in her uniform pocket. Joshua's intercom buzzed, startling him. "Mr. Reynolds, your 7:30 with the board is in 15 minutes. He'd been so absorbed, he'd lost track of time entirely, something that never happened. Joshua Reynolds operated on precision timing, every minute accounted for, every second maximized for profit. "Postpone it," he said. "Sir, the board members are already—" "Postpone it, Marcus." 1 hour. He hung up and rewound the security footage, watching the woman again. There was something in the way she moved through his space, not with the resentment he'd expect from someone cleaning up after the wealthy, nor with the indifference of someone just doing a job. She moved like she cared about what? His kitchen didn't need caring. It was a room, surfaces and appliances, nothing more, but she treated it like it mattered. Like he mattered. Joshua pulled up the Premier Cleaning Services contract and found the employee roster. 8 names for yesterday's crew. 3 assigned to kitchen duty: Robert Martinez, Thomas Chen, and Elena Vasquez Elena. He did what he'd done 1,000 times in business, researched his subject. But Elena Vasquez proved frustratingly difficult to find online. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook page filled with vacation photos and political rants. No digital footprint beyond a basic residential address in Pilsen, and a notation that she'd worked for Premier Cleaning for 2 years. 2 years. Had she been cleaning his penthouse all along? Had he really never noticed the same person moving through his space, touching his belongings, seeing his life? Of course he hadn't. He'd systematically avoided ever encountering them, treating the cleaning staff like ghosts who materialized only in his absence. His phone buzzed with increasingly urgent messages from Marcus about the board meeting. Joshua ignored them all. Instead, he pulled up Premier Cleaning's schedule. They'd be back Monday morning. 6:15 a.m., 90-minute window. He could wait until Monday, review more footage, gather more data. That's what the old Joshua would do. Observe, analyze, maintain distance while extracting information. But something had shifted. That sunflower now drooping on his counter had cracked something open inside him. A fissure in the armor he'd spent years constructing before he could second-guess himself. Joshua picked up his phone and dialed Premier Cleaning Services. Premier Cleaning, this is Diane. How may I help you? This is Joshua Reynolds from Reynolds Tower. I need to speak with one of your employees. Elena Vasquez. There was a pause. Mr. Reynolds, if there's an issue with our service, I should connect you with our... There's no issue. I need to speak with Ms. Vasquez today. Sir, our employees don't typically take client calls directly. If you could explain the nature of... I'll pay her hourly rate. Time and a half. I need 30 minutes of her time this afternoon. Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Reynolds, I'm not sure that's double her hourly rate. 1 hour, my office. I'll have my assistant coordinate the details. He could hear Diane calculating, probably wondering if this was a complaint that would cost them their most lucrative contract, or something else entirely. I'll need to check if she's available and willing. Can I call you back? You have 20 minutes. Joshua hung up and sat back in his chair, his heart racing in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine or market volatility. What was he doing? Why did it matter? It was just a flower, just a note, just a woman who cleaned his kitchen, but it wasn't just anything. It was the first genuine gesture of human kindness he'd received in longer than he could remember. Everyone in his life wanted something. Investors wanted returns. Employees wanted promotions. His mother wanted him to be someone he wasn't. The women he dated wanted access to his wealth and status. But Elena Vasquez, who had nothing to gain and potentially her job to lose, had left him a sunflower and a note that suggested she saw something worth nurturing in his sterile existence. 17 minutes later, his phone rang. Mr. Reynolds? This is Diane from Premier Cleaning. Ms. Vasquez has agreed to meet with you. She's concerned she may have overstepped yesterday. So Elena knew exactly why he was calling. She'd known the sunflower would be discovered, had perhaps even wanted it to be. 3 p.m. today. My office, 88th floor. He paused. And Diane? This conversation remains confidential. Of course, Mr. Reynolds. Joshua hung up and stared at the wilting sunflower. In 6 hours he'd have answers. He'd solve this mystery, restore order to his world, ensure it never happened again. So why did he feel like he was standing on the edge of a precipice, about to step off into the unknown? The city spread below him, indifferent as always. But somewhere in that vast urban sprawl, Elena Vasquez was receiving a message that would bring her face to face with the man whose emptiness she dared to acknowledge. And Joshua Reynolds, master of cryptocurrency markets and digital empires, found himself nervous about meeting a cleaning woman who'd left him a flower. His carefully controlled world was beginning to tilt on its axis, and for the first time in years, he wasn't sure if he wanted to stop it. The elevator chimed at precisely 2:58 p.m. Joshua watched the numbers climb on the digital display from his position behind his desk on the 88th floor, an office he rarely used, preferring the isolation of his penthouse above. But meeting Elena Vasquez in his private sanctuary felt too intimate, too revealing. Marcus had set up the conference room instead, all glass walls and leather chairs, the kind of space designed for power plays and negotiations. But at the last minute, Joshua had changed his mind and retreated to his smaller personal office, a space that at least pretended to be human-sized rather than designed to intimidate. When the elevator doors opened, Elena Vasquez stepped out, and Joshua's first thought was that security footage didn't do her justice. She wore the same teal Premier cleaning uniform, but she'd removed the company jacket, revealing a simple white shirt underneath. Her dark hair was still pulled back, but a few strands had escaped, softening her features. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that seemed incongruous with the nervous way her fingers gripped the strap of her worn shoulder bag. "Mr. Reynolds?" Her voice was softer than he'd expected, with just a trace of an accent he couldn't quite place. "I'm Elena Vasquez." Joshua stood, suddenly aware of how his custom-tailored suit, his imported Italian shoes, his entire carefully constructed appearance must look to her like armor, like a wall. "Miss Vasquez, thank you for coming." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, then immediately regretted it. Too formal, too much like an interrogation. "Please, sit down." She sat, her posture straight but not stiff, hands folded in her lap. There was wariness in her dark eyes, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or was it concern? "I want to assure you," she said before he could speak, "that I understand I violated protocol yesterday. The sunflower, it won't happen again. I hope this doesn't affect my employment with Premier Cleaning, or worse, their contract with—" "Why did you do it?" The question came out more abruptly than he'd intended. Elena paused, studying him. Up close, he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the calluses on her hands, folded in her lap, the small scar on her chin. Evidence of a life lived, of struggles faced. "Because," she said slowly, "I've been cleaning your home for 18 months, Mr. Reynolds, and in all that time, I've never seen evidence that anyone actually lives there." The words hit him like a physical blow. "I live there. Do you?" She met his gaze directly, not with defiance, but with a gentle challenge. "I've seen hotels with more personality than your penthouse. Everything is perfect, sterile, untouched. The books on your shelves have never been opened. I can tell by the spines. Your kitchen, with all those expensive appliances, has dust in places that would only accumulate if they'd never been used. There's a piano in your living room that hasn't been played. The keys have a specific kind of dust pattern." Joshua felt exposed in a way he never had, even when financial regulators had audited his company. This woman had been reading his life like a book, understanding his emptiness through the evidence of his unused possessions. "That's quite an inventory," he said, aiming for cool detachment but landing somewhere near defensive. "I'm sorry," Elena said, and she seemed to genuinely mean it. "I don't mean to overstep. It's just, yesterday was Thursday." "Thursday?" He didn't follow. "You've lived in that penthouse for 3 years. I've cleaned it for 18 months, every Tuesday and Friday. But Thursday was the 2-year anniversary of my daughter's death." The confession landed between them like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the carefully professional atmosphere. Joshua found himself speechless, a rare occurrence. Elena continued, her voice steady but soft. "Sophia, she was 7, leukemia." She paused, swallowing hard. "On hard days, I find myself doing small things to connect, I suppose. To remind myself that kindness still exists, that small gestures still matter." Sophia loved sunflowers. She called them sunshine flowers, said they proved that even plants could smile. Joshua's throat felt tight. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you." Elena offered a small, sad smile. "I saw that cookbook collection in your kitchen. The joy of cooking, mastering the art of French cuisine. Beautiful books, expensive books, never touched. And I thought about Sophia, how she'd beg me to cook with her, how we'd make messes and laugh. And I realized that you have everything, Mr. Reynolds, but maybe you've forgotten how to use any of it to actually live. So you left me a flower." His voice came out quieter than he'd intended. "A reminder, a very presumptuous reminder, I realize now." Elena straightened in her chair. "I crossed a line. I brought my personal grief into your professional space. It won't happen again. What if I wanted it to happen again?" The question surprised them both. Elena's eyes widened slightly, and Joshua himself wasn't entirely sure where the words had come from. But once spoken, he realized they were true. "Mr. Reynolds, Joshua, please." Another surprise. He never asked anyone to use his first name. "Joshua," she said carefully, testing the name. "I'm not sure what you're asking." Neither was he. But sitting across from this woman who'd seen his emptiness and responded with a sunflower, who'd lost everything that mattered and still found room for small kindnesses, Joshua felt something he hadn't experienced in years. A pull towards something real, something messy, something alive. "I'm asking," he said slowly, "what else you've noticed. In 18 months of cleaning my home, what other secrets has my penthouse revealed?" Elena hesitated, clearly weighing whether to continue this strange conversation or retreat to safe professional distance.
May I ask why?
"Because," Joshua heard himself say, "I think you see something I've stopped seeing. Or maybe something I never learned to see in the first place." She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen. Not as Joshua Reynolds the billionaire, but as someone smaller, more lost, more human. "You have photographs," she finally said, "in the bottom drawer of your bedroom dresser. Old photographs, a younger you, a woman who must be your mother, a man who looks like you but with kinder eyes. Your father, maybe. They're hidden away like they're too painful to look at, but too precious to throw away." Joshua's jaw tightened. He'd forgotten about those photos, had shoved them in that drawer the day he moved in and never looked back. "There's a child's drawing tucked inside one of the books in your office. Pride and Prejudice, specifically. It's of a stick figure in a suit holding hands with a smaller stick figure. It says Daddy and me at the top." "My niece," Joshua said hoarsely. "5 years ago, before you built your fortress," Elena finished gently. The words should have angered him. Instead, they felt like relief, like someone finally naming the unnamed thing that had been haunting him. "You have a life, Joshua," Elena continued. "It's just trapped, like a butterfly someone pressed in a book and forgot about. Still beautiful, but not breathing anymore." They sat in silence for a moment, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows, dust motes dancing in the light like tiny galaxies. "My daughter used to say that people are like houses," Eleanor said softly. "Some are always open with light in every window. Others keep all the doors locked, all the curtains drawn." But she believed that even the darkest house had a door, somewhere, that could still open. "You just had to find the right key." "And what's my key?" Joshua asked, surprising himself with the vulnerability in his voice. Elena stood, gathering her bag. "I don't know, but I think maybe you're ready to start looking for it." She moved toward the elevator, and Joshua found himself standing, not wanting this strange, unsettling, oddly comforting conversation to end. "Elena," he called out as she pressed the elevator button. "The sunflower. You said it won't happen again." She turned, eyebrows raised in question. "What if I asked you to teach me?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Not just about flowers, about living in all those unused spaces. Elena's expression was unreadable. The elevator dinged, doors sliding open. "I'm a cleaning woman, Mr. Reynolds, not a life coach, but you know how to find joy in small things. How to make a house a home. How to—" He struggled for words. "How to breathe life into empty spaces." She stepped into the elevator, her hand holding the door. "Why would you want to learn from someone who couldn't even save her own daughter?" The rawness in her voice made Joshua step forward. "Because you're still here. Still leaving sunflowers. Still choosing kindness, even when you have every reason to be bitter. That takes more courage than anything I've ever done." Elena's eyes glistened, but she blinked back tears. "This is highly irregular. So is leaving flowers for strangers." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I suppose it is." "Tuesday morning," Joshua said impulsively. "The cleaning crew comes at 6:15. What if this time I was there? What if instead of hiding I learned, not just about cleaning, but about all the things you notice that I miss? You want me to teach a billionaire how to clean his own home? I want you to teach me how to see my home the way you do." As something more than a collection of expensive objects, the elevator door chimed, wanting to close. Elena studied him one last time. "Tuesday," she finally said. "It's 2:15 a.m. Don't be late. The door's closed." And Joshua was left standing alone in his office, his heart pounding, wondering what exactly he'd just agreed to. Through the window, Chicago sprawled before him, millions of lives intersecting, each one a story he'd never bothered to notice. But now one story had noticed him back, had seen through his fortress walls, and offered him something he'd forgotten existed, a chance to learn how to live again. Tuesday suddenly seemed very far away. Tuesday morning arrived with unusual clarity, the kind of crisp autumn dawn that made Chicago's skyline look like it had been cut from crystal. Joshua had been awake since 4 a.m., unable to sleep, alternating between questioning his sanity and feeling more alive than he had in years. At 6:10 a.m., he stood in his penthouse kitchen wearing jeans, actual jeans he'd had to dig out from the back of his closet, and a simple black sweater. No suit, no armor. He felt naked. The service elevator chimed at 6:14 a.m. Joshua's heart hammered as the cleaning crew filed in, professional and efficient as always. They stopped short when they saw him standing there. Elena was the last to step out, and her eyes widened fractionally when she saw him. "Mr. Reynolds." "Joshua," he corrected, acutely aware of 7 other people staring at this bizarre scenario. Elena recovered quickly, turning to her team. "Everyone, this is Mr. Reynolds. He'll be observing today. Please proceed with your normal routines." She looked back at him with a raised eyebrow that seemed to say, "Are you sure about this?" He nodded. What followed was an education unlike any Joshua had ever received, and he'd attended Princeton and MIT. Elena assigned him what she called simple tasks, dusting the living room shelves. But there was nothing simple about it. She showed him how to remove each item carefully, how to dust in circular motions, how to notice the small things. "See this?" She pointed to a crystal paperweight he couldn't even remember buying. "It's got a small chip here. Probably happened during installation. But catch it in the right light." She turned it slightly, and suddenly rainbow prisms danced across the wall. Even broken things can create beauty. Joshua found himself mesmerized by those dancing lights, wondering when he'd last noticed anything so simple, so unexpected. "You're overthinking it," Elena said, watching him dust with intense concentration. "Cleaning isn't brain surgery. It's meditation. Let your mind wander." "My mind doesn't wander. It strategizes." "Then maybe it's time you let it get lost for a while." By 7 a.m., Joshua had learned the difference between dusting and actually cleaning, had discovered that his expensive hardwood floors had a grain pattern that told a story if you looked closely enough, and had broken his first dish, a Limoges saucer worth $800. When he tried to wash it too enthusiastically, Elena barely blinked. "Dishes break. It's what they do. You can't be afraid of breaking things, Joshua. Sometimes breaking is how we learn what's actually important." He stared at the shattered porcelain, expecting to feel loss or anger. Instead, he felt liberated. It was just a thing. Irreplaceable, meaningless thing. "Besides," Elena added with a small smile, "I've seen your credit card statements on the desk. You won't starve because of one saucer. You've seen my credit card statements? Hard to dust around them without noticing. You spent $47,000 at art galleries last month and $12 at actual grocery stores." She handed him a broom. "That's not living, Joshua. That's just acquiring." The observation should have felt invasive. Instead, it felt accurate. As the morning progressed, Joshua discovered muscles he didn't know he had. His back ached from bending to clean baseboards. His arms burned from polishing the dining table. He was sweating, actually sweating from manual labor for the first time since college, and he was smiling. "You're doing it wrong," Elena said, watching him attack the kitchen floor with a mop. "I'm following the pattern you showed me. You're following it like you're trying to conquer it. This isn't a hostile takeover, Joshua. You're cleaning, not dominating." She took the mop from him, demonstrated a gentler, more rhythmic motion. "Feel the difference?" You work with the floor, not against it. He tried again, mimicking her movements. Like this? Better see? You're learning. Those words, "you're learning," sent an unexpected surge of pride through him. When was the last time he'd been a student at something? When had he last not known everything, not controlled everything, not mastered everything? By 7:30 a.m., the other cleaning crew members had relaxed around his presence, even offering tips. Robert showed him the correct way to clean windows. Newspaper worked better than paper towels, he insisted. Thomas taught him about grout lines and the importance of corners. Rich people, Thomas said with a grin, always forget about corners. They look at the center of rooms, never the edges. But that's where life accumulates. Joshua found himself laughing, actually laughing, at a joke about his own ignorance. Elena watched from across the room, and when their eyes met, something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. The acknowledgement that this absurd morning was changing something fundamental. At 8 a.m. during a water break, Joshua found himself sitting at his own kitchen counter, something he rarely did, surrounded by the cleaning crew, listening to their stories. Maria talked about her grandson's soccer game. Robert complained about his landlord. Thomas shared his dream of opening a restaurant. These were real people with real lives. And he'd employed a company that sent them to his home for 18 months without ever knowing their names. Their dreams, their struggles. "You're quiet," Elena observed. Handing him a bottle of water. "I'm realizing I've been blind." "Not blind," she corrected. "Just looking in the wrong direction. You've been so focused on what's above you, bigger deals, higher profits, the next conquest, that you forgot to look around you." "Is that what Sophia taught you?" The question came out before he could stop it. Elena's expression softened. "Sophia taught me that every moment is a gift. She had so few of them, but she made each one count. She'd find joy in a puddle, magic in a cardboard box, friendship in everyone she met." Her voice caught. "She taught me that wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you appreciate." Joshua set down his water bottle, a realization crystallizing. "That's why you left the sunflower. Not to judge me, but to remind me. Maybe to remind us both," Elena admitted. "Some days I forget too. Get caught up in grief, in bills, in the weight of just surviving. But then I think, Sophia wouldn't want me to just survive. She'd want me to find the sunshine flowers everywhere." The moment stretched between them, heavy with shared understanding. Then Maria called out, breaking the spell. "Elena! The crazy expensive espresso machine is leaking again." "That's the third time this month," Elena sighed. "You know, Joshua, maybe instead of having a $15,000 espresso machine you never use, you could just buy a simple coffee maker and actually make coffee in it. I have people who make my coffee." "You had people. Now you're learning to be people." The distinction made him laugh. "Is that what this is? Becoming people? It's a start." By 8:45 a.m., the penthouse gleamed, and Joshua had never been more exhausted in his life. His back ached, his arms trembled, and he was pretty sure he'd never get the cleaning solution smell out of his hands, and he'd never felt better. "Same time Friday?" Elena asked as the crew prepared to leave. "Friday," Joshua confirmed. "And Elena?" "Thank you." "For what?" "Making you scrub your own toilets." "For showing me they needed scrubbing." After they left, Joshua walked through his penthouse with new eyes. Everything looked the same, yet completely different. He noticed the play of light on the marble, the way shadows pooled in corners, the subtle imperfections that made surfaces real rather than just expensive. He made himself coffee, awkwardly, spilling grounds everywhere, but he made it himself. It tasted better than any barista had ever made. That afternoon, he shocked Marcus by cancelling a meeting with potential investors. "Reschedule it," he said. "I have somewhere to be." "Where?" Marcus asked, confused. "A bookstore." He spent 3 hours at the bookseller in Lincoln Square, browsing like a person who read for pleasure rather than profit. He bought cookbooks. Not expensive art books, but actual teaching cookbooks with worn pages and margin notes from previous owners. He bought a novel Elena had mentioned in passing, something about finding magic in ordinary places. On the way home, he stopped at a flower shop. "Sunflowers," he told the florist. "The biggest, brightest ones you have." Back in his penthouse, he placed them in the kitchen vase, Elena's vase, he thought of it now, and stood back to admire them. They looked ridiculous in his minimalist kitchen. Perfect. He opened one of the cookbooks, found a simple recipe for pasta. He'd never cooked before, had no idea what he was doing, but he tried. The kitchen quickly became a disaster zone. Flour everywhere, water boiling over, smoke from burning garlic. It was chaos. It was messy. It was alive. The pasta was terrible, overcooked and undersalted, but he ate it at his dining table alone but not lonely, proud of the imperfect meal he'd created with his own hands. His phone buzzed with messages from his mother. Instead of declining, he called back. "Joshua?" Her surprise was evident. "I was just about to give up. Hi, Mom, about Thanksgiving. You're busy, I understand." "It's fine. Actually, I was thinking I might come. If the invitation still stands." Silence. Then softly, "Of course it stands, sweetheart. Always." After hanging up, Joshua sat in his penthouse as the city lights began to twinkle below. For the first time in years, his fortress didn't feel like a sanctuary. It felt like a starting point. Friday couldn't come soon enough. He had so much more to learn, so much more to discover. Elena had cracked open a door he'd thought was permanently sealed, and light was streaming through. He was learning to clean, yes. But more than that, he was learning to live. And for the first time since he'd built his empire in the sky, Joshua Reynolds felt like he was building something that actually mattered. The sunflowers glowed golden in the evening light. Their faces turned toward the windows, toward the city, toward life, just like his. 3 weeks had transformed Joshua's world into something unrecognizable. He now woke at 5:30 a.m. not for market analysis, but to practice making omelets before Elena arrived. His penthouse, once a sterile showpiece, now had evidence of actual life. A half-read novel on the coffee table, a sweater draped over a chair, dishes in the sink from actually cooking dinner. He'd even started a small herb garden on his kitchen windowsill, something Elena had suggested. The basil was thriving. The rosemary, not so much. "You're overwatering," Eleanor had said during last Friday's session. Sometimes the kindest thing is knowing when to step back. The words had lingered with him all week, echoing in his mind during board meetings and strategy sessions. Step back, let things breathe. Not everything needed to be controlled, but Wednesday afternoon, November 15th, everything changed. Joshua was in his 88th floor office, actually leaving at a reasonable hour for once. When Marcus burst in without knocking, something he never did, "Mr. Reynolds, we have a serious problem." The tone in Marcus's voice sent ice through Joshua's veins. "What kind of problem?" "The SEC just announced an investigation into our cryptocurrency trading algorithms. Someone's leaked internal documents suggesting market manipulation." Joshua's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. Our systems are completely legitimate. The evidence suggests otherwise. They have transaction records, internal memos, algorithm specifications." "Josh, this could destroy everything." The use of his first name signaled how dire this was. "Marcus never called him Josh. Who leaked it?" "We're trying to determine that now." "But there's more." Marcus's face was grim. "Eleanor Reynolds just posted on social media about corporate corruption and how some family members have lost their moral compass for profit." Joshua's stomach dropped. His own mother, publicly condemning him? "She doesn't understand the business," he said, but his voice sounded hollow. "The press is running with it. Billionaire's mother calls him out. It's trending on Twitter. Josh, investors are panicking. We've lost 40 million in market value in the last hour." Joshua sank into his chair, the careful world he'd been rebuilding suddenly crumbling around him. Everything he'd built over 15 years, every calculated risk, every strategic move, potentially destroyed by a leak and his mother's righteousness. His phone buzzed. Elena saw the news. "Are you okay?" He stared at the message. How did he answer that? No, he wasn't okay. His empire was under siege, his reputation in tatters, his own mother had publicly betrayed him. But before he could respond, another text arrived. "I'm coming up." Don't argue. Marcus, I need the room, Joshua said quietly. But Josh, we need to strategize. Now, Marcus. After Marcus left, Joshua sat in the gathering darkness, not bothering to turn on the lights. The city sprawled below, indifferent to his crisis, millions of lives continuing while his fell apart. The elevator chimed. Elena stepped out, still in her cleaning uniform from her shift at another building. She carried a small paper bag. You shouldn't be here, Joshua said, his voice flat. You should distance yourself. This is going to get ugly. Elena ignored him, pulled out a container from the bag, and set it on his desk. The smell of homemade soup filled the office, chicken and rice. Sophia's favorite. I make it when the world feels too heavy. I can't, I'm not hungry. Then I'll sit here while you don't eat it. She settled into the chair across from him. Want to talk about what's happening? Do you know what they're accusing me of? Market manipulation, fraud, destroying people's savings for profit. He laughed bitterly. Maybe my mother's right. Maybe I have lost my moral compass. Have you done what they're accusing you of? No, our algorithms are sophisticated, yes, but legal. We exploit inefficiencies. But every trader does that. It's how markets work. Then you'll prove your innocence. You don't understand. In the court of public opinion, I'm already guilty. My own mother thinks I'm guilty. The words broke something open inside him. 3 weeks ago, I called her. We talked for the first time in months. I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe they still are. She just publicly eviscerated me on social media. Elena was quiet for a moment. Did you read what she actually wrote? Joshua pulled up his mother's post on his phone, reading it aloud with bitter emphasis. It breaks my heart to see family members lose their way in pursuit of wealth. When profit becomes more important than people, when success is measured only in dollars, we've failed as a society. Some things are worth more than money: integrity, compassion, human connection. She didn't name you, Elena observed. Everyone knows who she's talking about. Do they? Or are you so certain you're the villain in every story that you assumed? The observation struck him silent. Was he reading guilt into her words because he felt guilty? Not about market manipulation, but about the years of distance, the missed Thanksgivings, the way he'd treated his mother's calls like interruptions to be managed. The SEC investigation is real, regardless, he said. Yes, and you'll have to face it. Elena pushed the soup toward him. But you don't have to face it alone, and you don't have to face it on an empty stomach. Joshua found himself reaching for the soup, if only to have something to do with his hands. The first spoonful was warm, comforting, tasting of care rather than expensive ingredients. Why are you here, Elena? This could damage you too. Association with me right now is toxic. Because 3 weeks ago, you showed up to learn how to clean your own home. You've been trying to become a better person. She met his eyes. I believe in second chances, Joshua, and first attempts, and messy beginnings. What if it's all for nothing? What if I lose everything? Then you'll discover who you are without it. She said it so simply, as if losing a billion-dollar empire was just another lesson to learn. His phone buzzed incessantly. Lawyers, board members, investors, press requests. The digital avalanche of his life imploding. Turn it off, Elena said. I can't just ignore. For 5 minutes. Turn it off. He did, and the sudden silence was deafening. Now, Elena continued, let's think about what you know for certain. Not what people are saying, not what you're afraid of, but what you actually know. I know our algorithms are legal. I know someone leaked false documents. I know the SEC will investigate and find nothing. Good. What else? I know I've been trying to change. His voice cracked. I actually called my mother. I was going to Thanksgiving. I've been learning to cook, to see my home as more than an asset, He stopped, overwhelmed. You've been learning to be human again, Elena finished. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because humans can be hurt. I had armor before, control, distance. This, he gestured at the soup, at her presence, at the person he'd been becoming. This makes me vulnerable. Yes, Elena agreed. Welcome to the human condition. We're all vulnerable here. How do you do it? After Sophia, after losing everything that mattered, how do you keep going? Elena's eyes glistened, because giving up would mean her life meant nothing. Every sunflower I notice, every small kindness, every moment I choose to keep living, it's all for her. And maybe, she added softly, maybe it's for me too. Maybe we're allowed to survive our own pain and find new reasons to wake up. Joshua's phone buzzed again, despite being silenced, the vibration rattling on the desk like an angry insect. Elena picked it up, glanced at the screen. "It's your mother." His hand froze halfway to taking it. "You should answer," Elena said. "She might surprise you. She just destroyed my reputation, or she posted her values, and you assumed it was an attack. There's a difference." Elena stood, gathering her things. "I should go." "You have a lot to handle." "Stay," Joshua said, surprising himself. "Please, I don't—" He struggled with the admission. "I don't want to be alone right now." Elena paused at the door, studied him for a long moment, then nodded and sat back down. "Okay. But you're eating that entire container of soup, and then we're going to make a list." "A list? Of what matters? What's real? What you're fighting for?" She pulled out a small notebook, the kind she used for cleaning checklists. "Because if you're going into battle, Joshua, you need to know what you're protecting. And I don't think it's just money anymore." He looked at her, this woman who'd lost everything and still showed up with soup, who saw his fortress and brought sunflowers, who believed in second chances even when the world was crying for blood. "You're right," he said quietly. "It's not just money. Not anymore." Outside, the city glittered with its usual indifference, but inside that office something shifted. The first real obstacle had appeared, threatening to destroy everything. But maybe, Joshua realized, destruction was just another form of transformation. Maybe losing everything material would reveal what had been there all along. Buried under layers of wealth and isolation, maybe falling was just another way to learn how to stand. His mother's call went to voicemail. The SEC investigation loomed. The media circus was just beginning. But for the first time in his life, Joshua Reynolds wasn't facing a crisis alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. The next 72 hours were a descent into hell. By Thursday morning, 3 major investors had pulled out, costing Joshua's company $200 million in backing. The SEC had frozen certain accounts pending investigation. CNN was running a special segment, "The Fall of a Tech Titan, Greed at the Top of the Tower." But the worst came Thursday afternoon, when Joshua discovered who had leaked the documents. "It was David," Marcus said, his voice heavy. "David Chen, your CTO." Joshua felt the floor tilt beneath him. David, his college roommate, his first employee, the man he'd trusted with every secret of his company's architecture. His friend. Why? "He's claiming whistleblower protection. Says you pressured him to create algorithms that crossed legal lines, that when he refused to participate further, you threatened his family." "That's insane. David designed those systems himself." Joshua's voice broke. "His daughter has leukemia. I personally paid for her treatment, the experimental therapy in Switzerland. I gave him unlimited time off, covered everything. He's saying you held that over his head, made him compliant through obligation." The accusation was so twisted, so perverse, it took Joshua's breath away. He'd tried to help, and it was being weaponized against him. Elena hadn't come Tuesday or Friday. She'd texted short messages of support, but something had shifted. Joshua could feel the distance growing, and he couldn't blame her. Association with him was becoming dangerous. By Friday evening, Premier Cleaning Services had quietly removed his account from their roster. No explanation needed. The message was clear. He was toxic. Joshua stood in his penthouse, surrounded by the small changes Elena had inspired, the herb garden now wilting from neglect, the cookbooks gathering dust, the sunflowers brown and drooping in their vase. All of it seemed foolish now, a brief delusion that he could be anything other than what he was, a man whose touch turned everything to gold, then to ash. His phone rang. An unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Joshua Reynolds." A woman's voice, unfamiliar. "Who is this?" "My name is Rebecca Morrison. I'm a reporter with the Tribune. I'm doing a story on Elena Vasquez and her connection to you. Ice flooded his veins. Elena has no connection to me beyond a professional cleaning service. That's not what our sources say. We have security footage of her entering your private office multiple times, spending hours there. We also have reports of large cash withdrawals from your accounts coinciding with these visits. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Mr. Reynolds. I'm asking for comment on allegations that you've been paying Ms. Vasquez for services beyond cleaning. Particularly interesting given her financial difficulties after her daughter's medical bills. Joshua's vision went red. Elena Vasquez is a woman of integrity who... So you do have a personal relationship? He realized the trap too late. Anything he said would be twisted, used against both of them. No comment, he managed, and hung up. His hands shook as he pulled up his security footage. Sure enough, there was Elena, multiple visits captured on camera, his gift of helping with Sophia's remaining medical bills, done anonymously through a charity, meant to ease her burden, was being portrayed as something sordid. They were going to destroy her to get to him. He called Elena immediately. It went to voicemail. He tried again, and again, finally a text. I know! They've been at my apartment. Don't call me again. I'm sorry. The words hit like physical blows. She was cutting contact, protecting herself. Smart, necessary, but it felt like losing the only real thing he'd found in years. Saturday morning brought worse news. David Chen's daughter had died during the night. The experimental treatment had failed, and David, in his grief and rage, was blaming Joshua. If he hadn't pressured me, if I'd been there instead of working his illegal schemes, maybe I could have said goodbye, David told reporters, tears streaming down his face. He took everything from me. Joshua watched the interview from his penthouse, feeling his soul crack. A little girl was dead, another Sophia, another bright life extinguished. And her father's grief was valid, even if his blame was misdirected. How could Joshua defend himself against that kind of pain? His mother called. He answered this time, desperate for any connection. Joshua, I saw the news about David's daughter. I'm so sorry. Are you? You helped start this avalanche. I never mentioned you specifically. You didn't have to. His anger erupted, months of hurt pouring out. You've always thought I was morally bankrupt, that my success meant I'd sold my soul. Well, congratulations, Mom. You were right. Everything I touch turns to poison. That's not what A little girl is dead. My friend hates me. A woman who showed me kindness is being dragged through the mud. And my own mother thinks I deserve it. Joshua, please. He hung up, immediately regretted it, but couldn't bring himself to call back. The penthouse felt like a tomb. All the warmth Elena had helped him cultivate had evaporated, leaving only the cold marble and expensive emptiness he'd started with. The universe was correcting his brief deviation from isolation, reminding him why he'd built these walls in the first place. People left. People died. People betrayed you. It was better to be alone. Sunday morning, he found himself standing on his balcony, something he rarely did, preferring the filtered safety of windows. The November wind was brutal at 89 stories up, cutting through his clothes, making his eyes water, or maybe that was tears. Below, the city hummed with life. People going to brunches, walking dogs, living ordinary lives unaware that one man's world was imploding far above their heads. He thought about David's daughter, about Sophia, about all the children who should have had futures, about Elena, who'd lost everything and still found reasons to leave sunflowers, about his own life, spent accumulating wealth that couldn't buy back a single moment of genuine connection. What was the point of any of it? His phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number with a photo attached. The photo showed Eleanor at a press conference, reporters surrounding her like sharks. But she stood straight, dignified. Her voice captured in the subtitle, Joshua Reynolds showed me kindness when he didn't have to. Whatever he's accused of, I know the man who learned to clean his own home. The man who talked about his family with regret. The man who's trying to change. That's the man I know. She was defending him. At cost to herself, she was standing up for him. A follow-up message. This is Maria from the cleaning crew. Elena wanted you to see this. She can't contact you directly. Lawyers advised against it. But she wanted you to know she believes in you. We all do. Joshua sank to his knees on the balcony, the wind whipping around him, the city sprawled below, and for the first time since he was a child, he wept. Not silent tears, but great, gasping sobs that tore through his chest. He cried for David's daughter, for Sophia, for every loss and betrayal and moment of human frailty that he'd spent years trying to insulate himself against. He cried for the man he'd been and the man he'd tried to become. He cried for Elena's courage and his mother's disappointment and his own crushing loneliness. And when the tears finally subsided, when he was empty and raw and stripped of every defense, Joshua felt something shift inside him. He'd lost everything. His reputation, his company was in jeopardy, his friendships destroyed, his attempt at transformation seemingly crushed. But Eleanor had stood up for him anyway. Had seen him at his worst and still found something worth defending. Maybe that was the real test. Not whether he could change when things were easy, when Elena was bringing soup and teaching him to cook, but whether he could hold on to that change when everything fell apart, when the easier path was to retreat back into his fortress and pretend none of it mattered. He pulled out his phone, hands still shaking, and made a call he should have made days ago. "Mom? It's me. Can we talk?" "Really talk?" There was a pause, then his mother's voice, thick with emotion. "I've been waiting 3 years for you to ask that question." "I'm sorry. For everything. I don't know if I can fix this mess, but I need to try. And I need to start by fixing us. You don't have to fix anything, sweetheart. You just have to let me in." As the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Joshua Reynolds stood on his balcony and talked to his mother. Really talked for the first time in years. About his fears, his failures, his desperate attempt to find meaning in a life that had become empty. The dark night wasn't over. The SEC investigation continued. David's hatred was real and raw. The media circus showed no signs of stopping, but Joshua had found something in the darkness, the understanding that transformation wasn't about becoming perfect. It was about becoming real, and real meant messy, vulnerable, sometimes broken, but it also meant connected. To his mother's voice on the phone, to Elena's courage in defending him, to the humanity he'd been running from his entire adult life. The darkness was still there. But so was he, and this time he wasn't facing it alone. The next 3 weeks moved like a slow-motion avalanche, destructive, but giving Joshua time to find his footing with each tumbling piece. His mother arrived the day after their phone call, letting herself into the penthouse with a determination that bypassed all of Joshua's security protocols. She took one look at the wilted herbs, the dusty cookbooks, the dying sunflowers, and said simply, "Let's start with the living things." Together, they cleaned out the dead plants, bought fresh soil, replanted the herbs. Eleanor didn't ask about the SEC investigation or the media headlines. Instead, she taught him her mother's recipe for pot roast, his grandmother's recipe, she corrected gently, and they cooked in comfortable silence, broken only by instructions and occasional laughter, when Joshua inevitably made mistakes. "You always were impatient," she said, watching him try to rush the simmering process. "Even as a boy, wanted everything to happen immediately. I've wasted so much time, Mom." "No," she stirred the pot thoughtfully. "You've taken the long way around. Some of us need to get lost before we can find our way home." The SEC investigation ground forward with bureaucratic slowness. Joshua's lawyers were confident. The leaked documents had been doctored, and they had evidence proving it. But clearing his name would take months, possibly years. "We can prove David fabricated the evidence," his lead attorney explained. "But it won't be quick and it won't be clean." Joshua thought about David, drowning in grief over his daughter. What will happen to him? Likely prison time for fraud and perjury. What if we don't press charges? His legal team stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Mr. Reynolds, this man tried to destroy you. This man lost his child. He's not thinking clearly. He's looking for someone to blame because the universe took his daughter and he can't punish the universe. Joshua paused. I want to establish a fund in his daughter's name for childhood cancer research. And I want to offer him treatment, therapy, support, whatever he needs. That's a terrible legal strategy. It's not a legal strategy. It's being human. The gesture made headlines for different reasons. Tech billionaire shows mercy to whistleblower, ran one piece. Is this PR stunt or genuine compassion? Asked another. Joshua didn't care about the headlines anymore. 2 weeks after the crisis began, Elena finally returned to the penthouse. Not as part of a cleaning crew. Premier Cleaning had permanently removed him from their client list, but as a visitor, carrying fresh sunflowers. I heard about what you did for David, she said, setting the flowers in the vase she'd brought months ago. That took courage. It took realizing that being right isn't the same as being whole. Joshua gestured to the kitchen where his mother was pretending not to listen. Mom, this is Elena Vasquez. Elena, my mother, Eleanor Reynolds. Eleanor emerged, studying Elena with the sharp eyes of a mother assessing her son's friend. Then her expression softened. You're the one with the sunflowers, and you're the one with the pot roast recipe, Elena smiled. I can smell it. It smells like love. Eleanor's eyes glistened. It is. I just had to remind my son what that smells like. The three of them had dinner that night, pot roast around the dining table that had always seated only Joshua's loneliness. They talked about Sophia, about grief, about finding purpose after loss. Eleanor shared stories of Joshua's father, dead 15 years now, and how his death had driven Joshua into work as an escape from pain. I thought if I could build something big enough, successful enough, the empty space he left would get filled, Joshua admitted. But it just got bigger. Empty spaces don't get filled from the outside, sweetheart, Eleanor said gently. They get filled from the inside, with connection, with love, with allowing yourself to be part of the world instead of above it. Elena nodded. Sophia used to say that people who build walls to keep hurt out also keep love out. She was 7 and somehow understood what took me years to learn. What changed for you? Joshua asked. You did. Elena's honesty was startling. Watching you try to learn, to change, to become more human, it reminded me that grief doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a different chapter. The investigation eventually cleared Joshua completely. The doctored documents were exposed, traced back to David's compromised computer. But instead of vindication bringing relief, Joshua felt only sadness for his former friend's downward spiral. He visited David in the psychiatric facility, where he was receiving treatment instead of prison time. Joshua had hired the best lawyers to ensure David got help. Not punishment. Why? David asked, hollow-eyed and broken. After what I tried to do to you? Because your daughter deserved a father who could heal. And because I understand now that hurt people, but maybe they can also help heal each other. Joshua established the Chen Foundation for pediatric cancer research, funded with $50 million, more money than he'd ever spent on himself. At the opening ceremony, he stood beside David, who spoke about his daughter's courage. Lily loved sunflowers, David said through tears. She said they were proof that even the smallest seed could create something beautiful if given the right conditions. Elena was in the audience, and when their eyes met, she smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and warmed Joshua's chest. Life didn't return to normal because there was no normal to return to. Instead, Joshua created a new normal. He restructured his company, implementing ethical oversight boards and profit sharing with employees. He sold the Penthouse, all 20,000 square feet of marble emptiness, and bought a townhouse in Lincoln Park with a backyard garden where he could grow actual vegetables. His mother visited weekly, teaching him recipes, sharing memories, rebuilding the bridge between them one meal at a time. Elena started her own cleaning company, one that treated workers fairly, paid living wages and gave employees ownership stakes. Joshua was her first investor, though he insisted on being a silent partner. I've been front and center long enough, he told her. Your turn to shine? Our turn, she corrected. We shine together or not at all. On Thanksgiving, Joshua hosted his first holiday dinner in the new townhouse. His mother, his niece and nephew Marcus and his family, the former cleaning crew who'd become friends. David, fragile but healing, and Elena with her extended family. The house was chaos, children running through rooms, too many cooks in the kitchen, laughter and arguments, and the beautiful mess of human connection. Joshua stood in his backyard, watching through the window as Eleanor helped his mother set the table, as children played. As David actually smiled at something Marcus said. "You look happy," Eleanor said, stepping outside with 2 cups of coffee. "I am. Terrified, uncertain about the future, still figuring out who I am without the armor, but happy." He accepted the coffee. "Thank you. For the sunflower. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Thank you for learning to look," Elena replied. "Not everyone has the courage to change. I didn't have a choice. You cracked my world open." "No," she corrected gently. "You chose to step through the crack. That was all you." Inside, his mother called them for dinner. As they walked back to the house together, Joshua realized that his penthouse in the sky had never been his home. Home wasn't about height or luxury or isolation. Home was this, messy, imperfect, filled with people who saw your flaws and loved you anyway. 3 months ago, Joshua Reynolds had been a billionaire in a fortress, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing that mattered. Today he was just Joshua, a man learning to cook, to garden, to connect, to live. The sunflowers in his garden had bloomed, their bright faces turned toward the afternoon sun, creating pockets of joy in ordinary soil, just like Eleanor had promised. Even the smallest seed could create something beautiful, given the right conditions, and sometimes the right conditions meant having everything stripped away so you could discover what actually mattered: love, connection, humanity, growth, the simple things that no amount of money could buy but anyone could choose to cultivate. As they gathered around the table, hands joining for grace, Joshua caught Elena's eye and smiled. She'd left him a sunflower and a note. Even towers need sunshine. She'd been right. The tower was gone, but the sunshine remained, and in that light, Joshua Reynolds had finally learned how to live. The city stretched beyond his windows now, not a kingdom to survey from above, but a community to be part of. And in this new perspective, surrounded by love and laughter and the beautiful imperfection of human connection, Joshua had found something more valuable than any fortune. He'd found his way home, and home, he realized, had been waiting all along in the spaces between achievement and meaning, between wealth and worth, between existing and truly living. All it had taken was one woman with calloused hands and a generous heart to show him where to look. The sunflowers swayed in the evening breeze, and somewhere in heaven Sophia smiled, knowing her mother had planted sunshine in the most unexpected place, the heart of a man who'd forgotten he had one, and that sunshine had bloomed into something neither of them could have imagined. A second chance, a new beginning, and proof that even the tallest towers can be transformed into gardens where connection grows. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.